yuan. For the first, president has called for new ways of trading around the globe during his visit to China, suggesting to use national currencies instead of the US dollar.
Every night I ask myself, why should every country have to be tied to the dollar for trade? Why can't we trade in our own currency? Today, a country needs to run after dollars in order to export, when it could export in its own currency. Who decided that the dollar was the currency after gold?
The call for de-dollarization comes as China and Brazil have conducted a transaction in yuan for the first time ahead of the Brazilian president's visit to China. The sides are expected to sign several agreements underscoring Beijing's role as Brazilia's key partner. Dilma Rousseff, the head of the New Development Bank, says that BRICS nations continue to prosper and have already outgrown the economies of G7 countries.
BRICS has become even more relevant. Together, the countries represent over 40% of the world's population and approximately a quarter of global GDP. In purchasing power parity, it is estimated that the BRICS economy is already larger than the economy of G7 countries.
I think the trip by Lula, the relationship that's evolving between Lula and the rest of the BRICS countries, and especially with China, is an enormous step in a long process. That long process has to do with the world adjusting to the enormous economic growth achieved by the People's Republic of China over the last 30 years. The United States is now going to have to share the position of a superpower, economically speaking, with the People's Republic of China. And one way that that happens is to allow the Chinese to enjoy some of the benefits, and they are economically very significant, some of the benefits that come from having a currency that is used around the world for economic trade and capital flows and so on.
What's poppin', my friends, my family? It's great to be back. Welcome to RBN Friday Live. And as you guys see, that was a great report by our friend Fiorella Isabel, who is our guest for today. So I want to welcome to RBN once again Fiorella Isabel, great independent journalist, doing great work at the Convo Couch and RT as well. Thank you for making time and thank you for joining us again, Fiorella.
Thanks for having me. A lot going on. So
yeah. So let's dive right into it, because you have done great coverage of Lula's foreign policy, and Lula, in the way I've been putting it, has been directly rebuking Joe Biden in the United States. What is your general take on Lula's position against the West? We're gonna dive into Lula calling for the end of the petrodollar, but I want to get your take on Lula's stance against the United States in general.
Well, first of all, I want to say that there were a lot of people who got Lula wrong because they were just using the really lazy reductionist analysis of Lula is a Soros puppet, because there was a picture with him and a few like shady people. And that's the thing, that can't be the limit of your analysis. That's very superficial, but that does get a lot of clicks. We've seen, because of the co-option of a lot of the anti-establishment movement by certain people in the right or certain sectors, that's basically what's happened, is that they just take these keywords, and a lot of these YouTubers that really just rely on that, they don't actually go to these countries. They don't talk to the people from these countries. They don't understand Latin American or the global South in general. They kind of ignore it, or ignore the people's actual opposition to the West. And they ignore that people are intelligent and that some governments are actually do work for the benefit of some people. And they have this whole overlooking thing where they're like, oh yeah, everybody's in on it. Everything sucks. It doesn't matter. And so I think that's just very lazy, because I do believe there are some truths to what we're talking about when we talk about things like the Great Reset and this global agenda. However, there's a lot of dynamics and intricacies that go into understanding the politics of each country. And if you're too lazy to do the work, then maybe, don't put your stuff out there. It's very weird.
Yeah, it was weird, because I was glad to see you one of the people that was pushing back on it. I was like, you guys gaslighting me. We pushed back on it on the RBN, because I have my RBN sister Josana, and I talked to many indigenous activists, including Claudia, who leads resistance movement down there. So I actually knew the critiques of Lula coming from them,
Yeah.
coming from communists, coming from socialists, coming from indigenous Afro-Brazilians. So then I heard like the criticism to come from right-wing populists. I'm like, wait, those things are not matching up. Like the criticisms that like Josana them had put to his left, like in terms of like drilling, working with neoliberals, concessions domestically, wasn't matching up with what I was hearing with the right-wing populists, how he's some sort of George Soros shill and how he's going to be a puppet in the United States. Those things wasn't matching up. So I'm glad he was one of the people calling it out. Do you want to chime in? I think you want to chime in, right?
Yeah, just on the reason why that's important isn't just to rag on these people, but it's because you have to look at the logical nature of Brazil. Brazil's politics is largely dependent, and in a way, their biggest trading partner is actually China. Their second one is the United States. So it's illogical to think that Brazil is just going to do whatever the United States wants, because they have been a huge part of BRICS. And even with Bolsonaro trying to isolate the country, because that's exactly what happened. As soon as Lula got in, he went back into SALAC. He went really full on with BRICS. Dina Rousseff was just inducted as a new president of the Banks of BRICS, basically, is what it is. And this is like, it's really just dumb to say that Brazil's just going to do whatever, Soros or Biden want, because Brazil's economy is a huge economy.
Yeah, sorry, Phil. Sorry, but it was a very Western centric kind of analysis. I know. I'm like, these are two different countries, two different approaches. But what Lula, go ahead. I want you to finish. I apologize.
Oh, no. You're so I was just going to say, and it is absolutely, you're right, Western centric. And I think this idea of being extremely individualist and thinking every government sucks really comes from the West, because we've had really crappy governments in the West, right? So it really comes from a Western centric perspective that no other government or anything good could ever come out of some sort of leadership or some sort of cooperation, that multipolarity is just not a real thing. And I think that comes from this Western centric view that everybody's out for themselves, but not everybody thinks like that. And we have to realize that in a way, it's very imperialist of us to have this perception that everybody else is just as dumb as we are, right? Not to be like, but in that way that everybody's just the same. It's not valid.
Yeah, for sure. And I was extremely confused, and I'm one of the people that I am for holding all leaders accountable. That's why you had Josana and many of the Brazilian communists I was talking to. They had a lot of critiques of Lula, and I am counting on them to hold Lula accountable domestically, like they said they would. But in terms of the global stage, because that's what I'm focused on, because I don't live in Brazil, right? So I'm looking at his global geopolitical politics. In the lead up to the election, Lula was saying this. He was running. He had a quote when he said he wanted to make a Latin American currency. Like, these are things he was saying before the election. He criticized NATO and Zelensky before he became president. So when they were saying these things after his quotes, it didn't make any sense. And it also, when I did see Western media preferring Lula over Bolsonaro, I was kind of confused as well. I wanted to get your take on that as well. I think mostly because of the COVID thing. I think because Bolsonaro. That's my personal theory. I think COVID and Bolsonaro's take on that freaked them out so much. It made them delusional about Lula, which kind of fed into this narrative that the West want Lula to win. So what's up with that? I think a lot of these people in the West were delusional. So you can add your take on that, and also your reaction to this headline, because it shows the delusion that some liberals had in this country.
Yeah.
Is that Brazilian President Lula risked alienating the United States in Europe as he hosts Iranian warships.
This is coping.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, both sides are right now trying to cope with what Lula did, because Lula basically just literally tricked everybody. Because the right thought he was just going to be a Biden, a liberal puppet. And you're right. Okay, so the reason why I didn't buy into that is because the U.S. establishment had their hand in helping to put Lula in jail. So there's no way that they're just going to come back and push him up unless there was a reason. And I do think that COVID might have played a role, but I think the further thing was they really did think they had Lula in their pocket. They really thought that he was just going to cooperate with the US more, and he was going to be taken seriously because Bolsonaro, more than anything, he was a really bad diplomat. He was just not a diplomat at all. And Lula is actually extremely diplomatic. You'll see pictures with him with revolutionaries like Fidel Castro, but you'll also see pics with him with like George Bush or somebody. The guy knows how to play the game in that sense. He's very political. A lot of people that I know say he's close to Vladimir Putin, that they actually are on terms where they do talk and engage. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that Lula played everybody essentially. And so while you had a bunch of the, MAGA sort of whatever communist types, and then like a bunch of the right-wing populists calling him like a Soros puppet, you also had the liberals saying, yeah, Lula's just going to cooperate with us. But really, in reality, Lula's going to do what Brazilians need the most, because that's really what this is about, is Brazil's economy. This isn't even about ideology, what's happening here, I think, in the global scale. This isn't about communism winning, like China pushing communism on the rest of the world. This is about respecting each country's national sovereignty. And this is repeated constantly by so many leaders and diplomats. It's repeated by Lavrov. It's repeated by the Chinese foreign minister. It's repeated by the president, the Chinese president. It's been repeated by Lula. It's been repeated by pretty much any country that's actually had the opportunity to try to work and mend and cooperate. And so when you see outlets like the Washington Post saying, oh, the U.S., Brazil is going to alienate the U.S., Brazil really, their number one partner is China. So they're not really worried about alienating the U.S. Otherwise, Lula wouldn't have gotten up and said, yeah, we need to ditch the dollar. Essentially, who made the dollar the number one currency after gold? So Brazil's not dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. They're the largest economy in Latin America. So they will have a lot, they'll basically be the big hub in Latin America with China's help, because China is already involved via the Belt and Road Initiative with 21 other countries so far. With Brazil, it would be 22. So that's just a given. And this is happening whether the West likes it or not.
Exactly. Well, so it's happening whether the West likes it or not. And I'm showing you guys some footage of the meeting that the West been freaking out about. And the Washington Post headline is hilarious, because I said it yesterday, the way Western chauvinists, the way they think is extremely interesting to me. So they see this giant coalition between Brazil, China, Russia, BRICS expanding, and their reaction to that is Brazil is isolating themselves from the West. You see how they are the center of the world, and a lot of them, I feel like they don't even see this coming. Like, they're still so smug. I play a video that Biden is reaping and sowing over in the 90s, where he said if Russia was upset and they want to run into China's hands, good luck. You're like, good luck for doing that. Now you see exactly what happened. Here's more footage. Let me put this one up here. I think this is just some more meeting. Here, I'm gonna play this. This is from Lavrov. And he says President Lula spoke at a press conference where he called for the U.S. dollar to be abandoned. This is a trend that will continue. The Americans basically are shooting their own backs by doing this, because they were in charge of the global financial system, using the dominant role of the dollar. And now everyone started fleeing. The path of sanctions, we have always said, is the path to nowhere. And sanctions has been something that I've been covering, and now you got U.S. foreign policy they are now paying for, which is great to see for me. I was talking to our friend Nico, and he was telling me, like, you guys need to get out. Like, you in Moscow, you're doing great reporting on Nico in Brazil. I'm about to gotta say, super jealous, because it's not looking good. It's not looking good, and this is the result. And this is the result of like long-term leadership from the guy who's our president Joe Biden. Anything else you want to add to that, Fiorella, before we shift topics there?
Yeah, so really quickly, I just want to say, so Lula initially landed in Shanghai. So he went to the inauguration of Dilma Rousseff, who is now the president of the Bank of BRICS, essentially. And so then he did that, and then he went to Beijing now to meet with Xi Jinping, and they've already said that they have announced 15 bilateral agreements, including everything from manufacturing, economics, agricultural development, etc. So many things. And so that is what's happening. And I wanted to agree with Lavrov, because this is something that people need to understand. The United States has done this to themselves by isolating, and their attempt to isolate China and their attempt to especially isolate Russia. Russia has pretty much been kicked out of the major economies of the West. So all of the things that are happening in the banking crisis and everything, Russia's pretty much immune from that. And so they were forced to look at other prospects, replace the European market, and they've done more than that. Essentially, their ruble is growing stronger and stronger. And basically what's happening is their new markets in the East, China, Pakistan, India, are paying off. And we're not just seeing that. We're seeing the Saudi Arabia's reemergence and diplomacy with Syria, with Iran. We're also seeing the Tunisia coming into play. We're seeing so much movement in the Arab world, which is the rise of Pan-Arabism, the same way we're seeing the rise of Pan-Africanism. And all of these countries have basically just jumped on and said, okay, this is our opportunity right now. Everybody, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I do think in a way, this is why, people are like, oh, well, you're just so pro-Russia. But the reality is like, people are excited about finally, especially countries in the global South, finally getting away from the boot of the US empire. And that is really a lot of what's driving this too. But economic need above all, as much as, you and I have a lot of similar views politically, this isn't even about our ideology. This is literally the need for people to just want to trade fairly and have a chance to have good economies for their citizens.
Well said, my friend. Now, this is Ben Norton also chime in on this. Brazil's President Lula just held a historic meeting with China's President Xi. They signed agreements to deepen cooperation on renewable energy, automotive industry, agriculture, green financing, information technology, health, and infrastructure, and are dropping the dollar. And not only do you have this, another thing that the West is really upset about, you have Lula that swore that he would not send weapons to Ukraine. And I gotta look at Lula, we gotta look at across the oceans at other partners to have leftists call out the Ukraine war and the NATO proxy war. So as Bernie Sanders and AOC and the squad is focusing on supporting Ukraine war, Lula says he refused and he's drawing a hard line at that, which is a very significant geopolitical development. So with this, I want to slightly shift focus on the conversation, kind of the same kind of topic. I want to talk about the ICC and the pressure that had been put on South Africa, and you can also speak on your opinion on the ICC wanting to arrest Putin for war crimes, as people like George W. Bush, Joe Biden, who's president, they walk free. And I just want to get your general thoughts on this, because I saw this earlier today and this caught my eye. And it said ICC arrest warrant for Putin, a big dilemma for South African government. I will just read a both here. I'm not going to get to the whole article here. South Africa said on Wednesday that an international arrest warrant for Russian President Putin had complicated matters for the country ahead of a BRICS summit. So they have a BRICS summit that they are hosting in August, and now you have the West that is trying to pressure South Africa to comply with the ICC warrant. And now, as predicted, South Africa is not really happy about the West and these hypocrites telling them what to do with their country. So I'm gonna play this clip, and I want your general thoughts on this story.
The possible.
This was covered by Breakthrough News. Let's play the video, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
Getting into the issue of the possible visit to South Africa by the Russian president, does the ANC regret not moving ahead with the process of initiating the withdrawal from the ICC? Because that was the intention after the embarrassment of the al-Bashir saga.
I would imagine that was a mistake not to move. I'm one of the people who's convinced that we should have moved out of the ICC quicker and have nothing to do with it, because it will talk about arresting Putin, but don't talk about criminals who should be in the ICC, who destroyed Libya, who are continuing to destroy Palestine, who destroyed Iraq, who destroyed Afghanistan, who can give a long list. Those people are not pursued by the ICC. All of a sudden, you must arrest the minister of, the prime minister, the president of Russia. I think we should not be in the ICC.
So as you guys see, the ICC has lost a ton of credibility. But Fiorella, what is your general take on this story and the reaction to West and South Africa?
Yeah, so first of all, the United States took itself out of the ICC because they didn't want to be charged with what they did in Iraq and their war on terror. And so they basically that to me was just like obviously losing credibility then, and now trying to focus on the evil Vladimir Putin is just pretty much, again, it's just projection, it's hypocrisy. And I do think it's really great what we're seeing here in the African continent as a whole, what we saw in Burkina Faso with the ousting of the French, what we're seeing here, this rise of Pan-Africanism. And I think it's great that South Africa is really following this trend, because it's not hard to believe that the leadership of Africa and the people of Africa are sick of U.S. intervention, because when the U.S. offers their help, and this is where I have a problem with people who want to equate China or even Russia with the Soviet Union having this close partnership with South Africa and ending the apartheid, right? And so this relationship has been a long one, because this has been a relationship in terms of ending any sort of colonialism. And Lavrov has said it many times, and other officials in Russia have said it many times, that the West is still trying to keep a neo-colonialist approach to Africa. And that is something that they have largely criticized, and a lot of people feel the same way. So with this, the ICC, push to incriminate Vladimir Putin, it's just the utmost level of hypocrisy, because as you mentioned, Libya is a huge one. Africans are not going to forget Libya. I mean, the U.S. went in there and created the biggest slave trade market. And you want to talk about pursuing Vladimir Putin? Well, you'd have a long list of others that would be pursued far before. And that's what they're saying. And this is coming from people of the continent who really understand that, because there's something, I think, to really living under U.S. hegemony and having seen your country and your people go through that, to hear the West tout themselves as this moral, virtuous sort of figure that is just that knows, that has never done any harm, and that, Russia and the East and China, they're all dictators, and Assad and all of this, they're just the evil ones, is really rich. And I think the people of Africa are never going to forget what happened to Libya. They're never going to forget what the U.S. did in the Middle East. They're never going to forget the fact that even till this day, the West continues trying to plunder the continent of its resources the same way they're doing to Latin America, and the same way that's their intent, because you have the most resources in the continent of Africa. You have lithium, you have copper, you have gold, you have everything. And why then is the African continent full of poverty when they're the richest continent? And that's the question that a lot of people in the global South have been asking themselves. And I think this moment in history with the push towards multipolarity is what we're seeing, that thought take rise and take hold, and say, you know what, we need to ditch dependence on the West. We need to hold our own. We need to build ourselves up. And we've been focusing a lot of our work on on Africa pretty much, and what's been going on there. So it's really important to follow that, because there's so much we don't know about Africa as Westerners, because we don't talk about it in the same way, right? And it's just been criminal what's been going on. So I'm really happy to hear that, and know that that thought process is extremely popular among the people of several countries in the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could not be more correct when you say there need to be more focus on Africa. We cover Africa a lot. Obviously, you guys at Convo Couch and your report on RT focus on that as a lot. I know it's personally, like, especially among the U.S. left, there's a lot of talk about imperialism. Like, everyone talk about the war on terror. You know what I mean? Everyone talk about the Iraq war, but people don't talk about Somalia. People don't talk about Yemen. People don't talk about Libya, because if you do, that will lead you down the conclusion that the Democratic Party is irredeemable because they were complicit with that, with the Republican Party as well. But another great point is that Africans are not falling for this propaganda anymore. There was a study that I covered a few weeks ago that they was asking thousands of people from all these different countries these questions about the United States and China, and it showed that Chinese propaganda is significantly more influential than United States propaganda. Now, the take you have from that is not that Chinese propaganda is great; it's to take that U.S. propaganda is not effective anymore. That the people are not buying that the United States have the best interest for people. So when people hear the Chinese response, when people hear Putin's response to the United States, and then they hear the United States response, they know they're full of shit. And that's a bad sign for the future of the West. Now, this was great coverage from the Gray Zone, and you can speak on this if you want as well. This is more coverage on the ICC. Max Blumenthal just released this yesterday, and it's a great article, how NATO states sponsored ICC prosecutors Putin arrest warrant. And I'll just read the bold subheadline. ICC Prosecutor General Karim Khan raised millions from NATO states by crafting an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin while freezing investigations into well-documented United States and Israeli war crimes. Along the way, he won powerful friends in Washington, London, Kyiv, and Hollywood. So this is what I think a lot of leaders on the global stage is not going to stand for. I remember when the Human Rights Council were trying to condemn Russia's invasion, and what the Cuban representative said, we can't support this because you're going to create this weapon of hypocrisy that is born through corruption, as we've seen here. So you guys should check out that article. That's a great one there. Any final thoughts on the ICC, the hypocrisy coming from the West? Any final thoughts before we move on to our last topic of the day?
Yeah, no, I just think the ICC is just, I mean, it's entirely a joke at this point because, again, they're very biased as to who they're going to incriminate at this point. And just like a lot of the entities that are supposed to serve as beacons of justice, they have been led by the United States and the West and NATO to only go after the entities they approve of. And so then it loses any sort of credibility on the general sense, because not only does that insult the rest of the world, which, by the way, Europe and the United States think that the world revolves around them, right? That they think that they're the beautiful garden and everybody else is a jungle. Well, the rest of the jungle is really sick and tired of that. And everybody else is creating their own sort of self-reliance on each other. They're cooperating with each other after being forced to do so, and they've realized the strength is much greater. The amount of people and the amount of power and money that is to be held by BRICS countries, as more and more are joining, has already surpassed the G7 countries. So this is a point of no return here. They've realized they no longer need the West, and what we're seeing here is a shift. And I think for people like us, Nick, I think it's beautiful to see because, you know, not just our background, but like the anti-imperialist aspect of it, of finally seeing people who have been really just getting the short end of the stick for decades and centuries, finally having a chance. And the West is so mad about peace in the Arab world. They're so mad about Africa really opening their arms to Russia and China, but rejecting the United States and Europe, because they know that with the others, they might get a fair shot. They might get treated as equals, because at the end of the day, what most of these countries want, and this is something Pasta and I always talk about, this is something I've seen in Latin America, what most people in countries want is literally to be respected and recognized as sovereign, independent countries without somebody coming and telling them what to do, who to talk to, what to think. And if we can't, at minimal, as the United States, if the United States government can't minimally do that, then of course it's in their best interest to say, bye-bye, we're going to go somewhere else.
Well said, my friend. Now I'm going to just play a few of these super chats. Give a few shout outs I saw. This is Black and Empire. Good shout out to my friend. Thank you for $2. He said, it's my favorite Russian lady. Much love, my friend. Black and Empire. We got this new tab.
Daryl.
Like, You guys get upset with me when we miss super chats every once in a while. I love they got this new update where I can actually see all the super chats now, which is dope. That's a great update. So I won't skip you guys. I never do it out of malice. It's because it's usually hard to monitor the chat all the time. This is another one from man, I apologize, but Tag Derb. Thank you for $2. Thank you for covering this story. Absolutely. And I think it's extremely important to cover not only the happenings of Africa, but outside of our country. It allows you to easily, like, to me, like foreign policy and seeing U.S. imperialism, that was the thing that was the greatest shock to me. And that was the thing that pulled me out of the red-blue game more than anything else. Because when I saw how in line they was on that, when I see how they were complicit with human suffering, and I realized everything else was theater after that. So when you look at Africa, when you look at South America, when you see how much agreement that these people actually have on how the world should be ran, it's like, man, it's really jarring. So that's why I tend to cover those kind of things. So much love for the super chats, guys. The last story we'll cover today is more of analysis on how our media works, and I also want to get your take on the Ukraine leaks. That the media has been trying to use this leak as a way to justify and create sympathy towards the Ukrainian cause so they can get more funds. But it's been devastating because it's shown how much Ukrainian casualties there are in this war. This Terry, I'll just read her tweet. This is a great one. They also reveal this is the story here, that there are 14 United States troops in Ukraine. I mean, I would have guessed that anyway. There was a story we cover how there was British special operations in Ukraine as well. So that doesn't surprise me. But I want to analyze how the media is covering this leaks. But before I do that, let's read this tweet from Tara Reid. She said $114 billion of taxpayer money sent to Ukraine. The Department of Defense flunking its audit 6 times. Congress never declared war. Biden stated no troops in Ukraine. This is a crime. So you have Biden, this was Tariq calling out. Biden says there are no troops in Ukraine. But that is one of the things that the leaks expose. And now I'm going to show this from System Update, because it's kind of how the way the media is also kind of covering this story. And I want to get your take on this after I play the video. Instead of holding people like Biden accountable for lying, instead of holding the government accountable for spying on his allies, which was revealed as well, the media in our country is focusing on wagging their finger at the Pentagon for allowing this leak to happen. The fourth estate. So I spoiled it. So I'll play just a little bit of this so you guys see what I'm talking about.
Okay, in the days after the leaks came to light, what steps has DoD taken to reduce the number of people who have access to not only these classified briefings, but classified material in general? You are taking steps to tighten that, I guess, population who might have access to this level of information.
General Ryder, you say that there are strict protocols in place, and yet a 21-year-old airman was able to access some of the nation's top secrets.
This is their question.
How did this happen, and isn't this a massive security breach? What is your message to anyone who might be thinking of leaking these kind of documents in the future?
Can you tell us, are there less people who have access to this type of information today than there were a week ago?
So I'm literally pausing halfway. I think the point is made. There's literally more of this, like another minute of questions like this. Instead of asking substantive questions, the media acts as an arm of the Pentagon. Anyway, Fiorella, I would love to get your take on this. You can speak on the leaks as well if you want. What's your general reaction?
Yeah, so first of all, on the way the media is taking this, that's because they've been instructed to do so. The video that went viral of the Fox News anchor and the correspondent basically saying that Fox has agreed not to publish these leaked documents. So Fox has agreed not to do journalism. And we know this, Nick. We know that that's the reason we do this. A lot of us is because we know that our media is completely a PR for the State Department. We know that that's a fact at this point, whether Twitter or not decides to label them that, right? Because then they'll have a tantrum. But the reality is that is what our media is. And it's just an extension of the State Department of the government, which is extremely fascistic. It's not at all any sort of, publicly funded or anything like that. It's just completely, and you can't even say it's the state and the state governing over the people. It's literally a segment within the state and the defense industry, the Pentagon, etc. And so when we say that, this is exactly what we mean. They're not going to actually question the content of the leaks. They're not even going to go into that. They're just simply going to focus on, oh my gosh, is there more security to prevent this from happening? And that's how, in my opinion, this is why I've questioned these leaks, because compare it to the way they've reacted when Cy Hirsch released his information, the way he was called a blogger, even though he's like a renowned independent investigative journalist, the way they just dismiss and call everybody an asset or something when they actually are threatened by information. It seems like this information was released with control. A 21-year-old, that is a question, a 21-year-old getting access to this, a national serviceman, which is what he was, Air Force serviceman, I believe. And so it's just really weird to me that happened, but that's even a whole other discussion. But I do think that the reason this is being pushed out there is for a sort of narrative to basically push the censorship of any information and to just belittle the questioning of what the real American people are having. Because Nick, I think you've probably noticed so many people have been questioning the pretty much the details that the United States has provided to the West and via the media about Russia, Ukraine, about everything. So many Americans have begun questioning that to the point where now it's threatened the establishment's, aim and their objectives. So it seems to me that they're using this to sort of say, oh, we need more security, we need more censorship, and also with the TikTok legislation and all of that to pretty much prevent people from actually hearing anything outside of this managed narrative. And I think that's actually a danger that we as Americans should really be pushing back against.
I can tell their intentions based on the way they're covering this. I don't know if you noticed this, but they keep saying these were leaked on private messages like Discord. There was circulated on social media. What is going on? Why is all these leaks on social media and Discord, which is a gaming app? That every story led that way, which makes me believe this is their way to manufacture consent for the Restrict Act, which is a horrific bill. Now, and this is why I say this. It's convenient that all this shit is dropping at the same time. So I love that you mentioned this because you right on the same track as I am, because this is reported by NBC News. The Biden administration is looking to expand how it monitors social media sites and chat rooms after U.S. intelligence failed to realize classified Pentagon documents circulated online for weeks. You guys see? Y'all see what Fiorella's talking about? You guys see what we're talking about here? This is exactly what this is meant to do. As people started to question this war more, they're going to use this leak as a way to justify this massive power grab by the executive and legislative branch in this country. So this is what it's about. This is a great tweet from Steve, because this is kind of in our same line of thinking. He said, this is the authoritarian's playbook. Create a boogeyman. Whip up fear. Control the narrative. You mentioned that earlier. Control the narrative. Silence dissenting voices. Strip away rights for protection. Weaponize police state against dissenting voices. That is what the Restrict Act is, and that is what they are trying to manufacture consent around. And we got to be hip to this because they're trying to incorporate these new tactics to trick like young people. You see like young Democrats, they fall for it, like the youth wing of the Democrats, like they fall for this stuff. So they try these new tactics, and independent media, we gotta be the one who call it out. We gotta be the ones to give people the heads up, right? But Fiorella, any last thoughts on this topic? And I'm gonna get you out here soon because you got a show you got coming up here soon. But any last thoughts on this topic in general?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really obvious you mentioned it, right? All of this happening at the same time. It's not coincidental, guys. We've seen this playbook before, as was just mentioned in the tweet. Like, this is a reoccurring playbook with so many things that are used against to divide people, are also used to restrict our rights as civilians, especially as more and more dissent grows. they see us looking at what's going on in France, and they're like, oh, no, we're not going to have that here. Because, I mean, our population in the United States is extremely distracted, extremely uneducated on foreign policy, which is really what drives everything else. Our foreign policy, does drive our domestic policy. It's essentially what drives it, because everything that's going on in Ukraine, we're ignoring what's happening on the domestic and in the United States, the growing inflation, the increase in rents, the increase in houselessness. They want to distract you with all these things like about Trump and all of this other crap. But like the reality is, while that's happening, every single major economist is predicting a recession. Meanwhile, the yuan has grown. It's basically more than doubled. It was like in the 2% of the world currency, and now it's being used at a 4.5%. And it's going to increase. And of course, that's along with Russia and all these other economies participating. And that's not good for the people of the United States. Isn't that something that I'm joyous in seeing? Because I know a lot of my friends and family are going to be suffering because of the decline of this. But that is exactly what is happening. And, I think the American public really needs to pay attention to the world economy, because that's really what is indicating what is happening at home. And these sort of things like trying to restrict our free speech. This is why Julian Assange, again, is so important. And things like fighting for the release of political prisoners is so vital and key, because it's like, well, we have to have that ability to question. We have to have that ability to dissent. We have to have that ability to really think for ourselves. And so much of what was the quote unquote left, like the liberals at this point, right? They're not really the left, but that's what people think of when they think of the left, the squad, etc. They have become just complete and total tools of silencing any sort of dissent, of vilifying it, even to the point of calling everybody that dissents some sort of agent of Syria, of Russia, of China. And we're going to see that ramp up as our economy dwindles, and as these war hawks try to push war with China now, because pretty much the Ukraine war is a complete and total loss. They can try things with Georgia, they can try things with Poland, they can try to move things here and there, but that's pretty much a loss for the West. And now they have to shift gears to China. And this is where, of course, the conservatives that so many people were thinking were going to be so anti-war, they're going to surprise a lot of people who don't understand U.S. American politics by becoming some of the most hawkish voices in our government, because they have this anti-China button like no other, because they think the Chinese are coming to spread communism in the United States. And so they're going to start ramping up every single ounce that they oppose in Ukraine to China and via Taiwan, right? And so that's what the shift that we're going to be seeing. And I think it's extremely now more than ever important to oppose the Restrict Act, because it's not about TikTok, right? That's what they use. It's not about moral, saving our kids and all of that. There's a reason why China has a different mindset than people in the United States. Our culture values reality TV. Our culture values distraction and capitalism and all of that. China is a completely different mindset. They're more of a collectivist culture that has nothing to do with TikTok or like, the Chinese coming in and manipulating us. No, that's us. Everything that is happening is from within our own government. It's not the boogeyman of Russia. It's not the boogeyman of China. It's literally our own government.
Well said. That's a fire way to wrap up the show. So you got another program you're preparing for. Make sure you guys check out. It's Convo Couch. You going live on Convo Couch. Make sure you check that out. Any last thoughts? Anything else you want to shout out as well? Thank you for joining us. Fiorella, any last thoughts?
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, so I'll be on the Convo Couch to discuss this, the Lula da Silva's trip as well. We're also going to have a guest on, Mark Sloboda. He is a great geopolitical analyst, and he's going to be talking about the Pentagon Papers a little bit more and what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And also, I'm going to be live on RT later today for you guys. So I'll be doing that as well. So yes, thank you for having me, and good job on what you guys are doing, and keep doing it. And yes, keep opposing the machine.
Yeah, make sure you guys check out Fiorella. Always great takes and analysis on geopolitics. And you're very busy today. That's why I appreciate you making time for me today. So I'm gonna pop you out in the background. Thank you, Fiorella. And I appreciate anyone who watched. Make sure you guys like and share and subscribe. This was a substantive conversation, as always, with Fiorella. Thank you for the super chat, Elizar. I think for 199 Love RBN. We also have the Savvy Show. Usually airs on Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. That's going to be later on today. Also, make sure you guys check out the description box. In the description, I'll put the link to our GoFundMe. That's how we pay our labor, the people who make our thumbnails, the people who edit, the people who do our social media. And it's a way for us to continue to do this work and possibly expand. So if you guys enjoy this content, you guys want to see RBN continue to grow, we got to GoFundMe. We also got a way for low dollar direct donations as well. So that just help us continue to do the independent media that we do. Much love and appreciation to all you guys. We got constant content going your way. So make sure you check to see if you're subscribed as well. Make sure you have a good weekend, my friends. Have a good one.